It's one of the most famous borders on Earth, yet you've probably never seen it. Stretching 2,000 miles across northern India, it's known as the Line of Control. And it cuts through the middle of Kashmir, one of the most beautiful places on Earth. Welcome to my channel. For centuries, the Indian subcontinent was home to mighty empires. And by the mid-19th century, almost all of it was under the administration of the British East India Company. Then, in 1858, after a series of rebellions, Britain took direct control, establishing what would become known as the British Raj. They ruled until 1947, at which point this part of the world became independent. Now, at first glance, it seems like a united India would have made sense. Shared geography, intertwined cultures, centuries of common history, and a united anti-colonial struggle. But instead of unity, independence triggered one of the bloodiest partitions in modern history, leading to India, Pakistan, and later Bangladesh. The reasons go far beyond religion. They're rooted in colonial strategy, political failure, and deep cultural fractures. So here's why isn't the Indian subcontinent one country? To understand how we got here, we need to travel back in time, to ancient and medieval India. Back then, various rulers controlled vast parts of the subcontinent. We're talking about the mighty Maurya Empire, the Guptas and the Mughals, among many others. But while these empires stretched across large areas, they rarely incorporated all of the lands we associate with modern India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh. Instead, these early states were often based around a single city or region, and there were dozens of them. What's more, despite being culturally South Asian, they had distinct languages and traditions. Sanskrit was a common literary language, but local vernaculars dominated daily life. Also, different religions thrived in different parts of the subcontinent. Hinduism, Buddhism, and Jainism emerged in the north, while the Bhakti movement and later Islam spread in the south. As a result, despite living in what we today call India, people back then wouldn't have identified as Indian, but rather as belonging to a particular region or religion. This patchwork remained throughout much of India's history and was only changed with the arrival of the British. The first European to set foot on the subcontinent was said to be a Portuguese explorer named Vasco da Gama back in 1498, but it was until the 1700s that the British began to establish themselves as well. By then, several European powers had established trading posts, and the British were keen to compete. In 1611, they established the British East India Company, which quickly grew from traders to rulers. The company flourished thanks to a growing demand for cotton textiles in Europe, as well as the introduction of new products like tea and spices. The British East India Company ruled directly over some areas, but much of the subcontinent was still under the control of local rulers, who paid tribute to the company. The company's ambition and ruthlessness is perhaps best symbolized by the Black Hole of Calcutta, a prison in which an estimated 120 British prisoners died of starvation and disease after being held in a tiny room for over a night. Following this incident, the company went on to conquer Bengal, after which it was no longer called the East India Company, but the British Empire. Then in 1858, after a series of rebellions, including the Sepoy Rebellion, in which the British accused Indian soldiers of mutiny, direct control was handed to the British government. This marked the beginning of the British Raj, a period of British rule that would last until 1947. During this time, the subcontinent was largely unified politically, but still governed very much along colonial lines. While most of the territory was under direct British control, 562 princely states were allowed to retain autonomy, so long as they recognized British suzerainty. Those states would remain in power until Indian independence. During the Raj, the British built grand rail networks, introduced English education, codified laws, and created a professional civil service. Yet this period was also marked by poverty, inequality, and mass migrations. Many of those changes were the result of a deliberate divide and rule strategy adopted by the British. Like their predecessors, the British distinguished between the subcontinent's different regions. In fact, at one point, India's Viceroy Lord Curzon boasted that he'd never set foot in India. He knew it only as a geographical expression. That might sound crazy today, but remember that India, as Indians understood it, didn't exist either. The British built up divisions between India's many regions, but perhaps the most significant cleavage was between Hindus and Muslims. After all, the former made up 2/3 of the population, while the latter about 1/5. At first, the British didn't particularly favor one group over another, but as the end of empire approached, they began to use religious identities as a way to divide and rule. So as tensions rose, the British supported Muslim interests in order to counterbalance Hindu power. This only deepened existing rivalries and ensured that neither community could ever hope to rule the entire subcontinent without the other's cooperation. In fact, such divisions are believed to date back to the 1860s, when the British implemented policies that entrenched different communities along religious lines. The results would come back to haunt them. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this video, stay tuned for more. Now back to the show. In 1885, the Indian National Congress was founded by a small number of educated Indians, most of whom were Hindus. Meanwhile, Muslims were largely unrepresented in politics. That finally changed in 1906, when the All India Muslim League was founded following a wave of Hindu-Muslim violence in Bengal. At its core, the Muslim League advocated for Muslim interests and demanded safeguards for Muslims in any future independent state. This alarmed the Indian National Congress, which viewed the League as a threat to Hindu dominance. As the 20th century progressed, demands for independence grew, as did the subcontinent's population. By 1940, India was home to nearly 400 million people. Then World War II broke out, which proved to be a watershed moment. On one hand, Indians volunteered to fight alongside the British, and many hoped that their contribution to the war effort would persuade the British to grant independence. But instead, the British used the war as a pretext to tighten their grip on the subcontinent. They passed the 1940 Government of India Act, which gave provincial legislatures more power, but stopped short of independence. Furthermore, the British promised to consider granting dominion status to India after the war, but stipulated that it would be up to the Indian people to decide whether they wanted to be united or not. This opened up a whole new set of conflicts. Following the war, both the Indian National Congress and the Muslim League claimed to speak for all Indians. The British, meanwhile, refused to commit to a timeline for independence. The result was a stalemate. Then came a turning point: the assassination of Mahatma Gandhi's close aide, Mahatma Gandhi. In response, Gandhi embarked on a fast to death, which ended with the British agreeing to transfer power by June 1948. With that, the Indian Independence Act was passed and the British Raj came to an end. While the goal had always been independence, nobody was quite prepared for what happened next. Despite considerable efforts to draw up a compromise, India and Pakistan were born overnight. And within weeks, the 400 million people living there were split into separate pieces. Over 10 million of them were displaced, and nearly 1 million killed in communal violence. Kashmir was left unresolved, which would trigger wars and a permanent rift. Today, India and Pakistan remain locked in a bitter rivalry. They've fought 3 wars, regularly clash along their disputed borders, and support rival political factions. Each has nuclear arms, and neither can forget the trauma of partition. Actually, Bangladesh was also born out of partition. In 1971, following years of growing tensions between West and East Pakistan, the latter declared itself an independent state. Following a brutal crackdown by the Pakistani military, millions fled to India. The United Nations brokered a peace deal, and the world gained another independent nation. Today, India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh each have their own distinct national identities, political systems, and ideologies. India is the world's largest democracy and remains secular. Pakistan, meanwhile, has been ruled since the 1950s by the military and is officially an Islamic republic. Bangladesh is a relatively new state whose identity is rooted in the Bengali language and culture. What's more, each has suffered greatly under colonial rule and then fought to win their freedom. Ask anyone from any of these countries and they'll tell you that their independence was hard-won and fiercely cherished. That's why even today, there's no serious discussion of reunification. Sure, there have been calls for greater cooperation. But given the state of relations and all those unresolved issues, no serious politician would advocate for joining the countries together again. So even though the Indian subcontinent was once ruled as a single colony, it fractured due to deep-rooted religious divides, political failures, and the legacy of colonial manipulation. turning centuries of shared history into a tale of separation. And now, even with trade, migration, and cultural overlap, the idea of a united subcontinent feels more like a fantasy than a future. Thanks for watching. If you liked this episode, check out our videos on why the Korean Peninsula is on one country and why the Ottoman Empire is on Turkey. Leave your comments below and subscribe for more insights into the world's most important stories.